why you won't heal your trauma just with this, just with the mind. There is so much more going on when we experience difficulty, when we experience pain, when we start moving through fear. There is so much that is going on and unraveling itself. Trauma does not only register in the cognitive mind, in the brain, it registers in the body. For example, let's look at this. There are about 100 billion or so, it's estimated there are about 100 billion neurons in our brain. We have in our hearts about 40,000 or so sensory neurites. Now, whilst their role is slightly different to what the brain does in the way it registers experiences, interprets experiences, understands experiences, and then processes them and forms ideas, beliefs, and ways of being around those experiences, here's what's important to understand. We will not heal our trauma through only understanding the trauma or registering or processing it through the brain and through the mind. We have to integrate our bodies. Trauma is not only stored in the brain, it is stored in our bodies. What's an example of trauma? Because this is a really important one. Trauma resides on the spectrum. There's no someone's trauma is better or worse than someone else's. Trauma can be sexual abuse. Trauma can be physical abuse. Trauma can be emotional abuse. Trauma can be seeing someone get hit by a bus. Trauma can be your teacher telling you you're not good enough. And the way you interpret that in the mind and the way you feel that in the body, the emotions that are attached to that experience and to that set of thought processes allows you to go down a road of not being enough, of experiencing that pain, of not feeling fully connected. That's a problem. That's a pain point. We experience that and we can't shift it from our being. That becomes very painful. And so what tends to happen is we lose ourselves in that. We try and fix, quote unquote, fix ourselves with the mind. It doesn't work. Now, granted, there is a great deal of power and self-empowerment that comes from reframing and rewriting the stories of our lives. That's why talk therapy can be so effective. This isn't a question of displacing any form of therapy or modality. In fact, talk therapy is very important. Again, it helps us reframe our understanding of what we experience. That can have a physiological impact on us. That can rewire our brain patterning, our behavioral patterning, how we see ourselves. It can elevate our self-esteem and self-worth. We then move out of this self-blame, this perpetuated self-blame and shaming space, and we move into a place of self-forgiveness, compassion, deeper understanding, a deeper acknowledgement and awareness of self. Now, what happens when we start to deal with trauma and pain from a place of heart and from the body, we start to feel those emotions that have been repressed and suppressed and that we've been avoiding, and that we've developed coping strategies around numbing these experiences. When we start to release them from our body, as an example of this or a modality could be breath work. An example of this could be even something as simple as cold plunge therapy. That can help us get back in our body, because with trauma, I read an interesting story the other day around a woman that had experienced extensive sexual abuse. And what she began to speak to was that every time she would be sexually abused, there was a little hole in the wall in her room. And she would literally transport, well, not literally, but she would, in her mind, transport her body into that hole in the wall. And that disassociation, that disconnection is one of the coping strategies. So we're disconnected from our bodies. And so these emotions, these painful emotions that we felt at a point of being of inflicted trauma, we don't deal with them. And so we have to, at some level, in a supportive way, we have to go into them. And we do that through the body. Breath work is one of a very powerful tool and modality to help us navigate that pain, to help us navigate that trauma. And often we don't understand it. Deep embodied shadow work, where we're able to access our voice, our feelings, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration, whether it's deep despair, and giving voice to that in a safe environment. There is something very, very empowering about that. And we don't have to understand it. Sometimes the insight comes later. The insight, if it comes, sometimes it comes when we're in that space of expressing trauma and moving it through us. And sometimes it comes later and sometimes it doesn't come at all. But when it releases, there's something that happens within us that frees us. And that's that point of liberation that we have when we combine our minds, utilizing our brains, when we combine utilizing our hearts and our bodies, and we begin to explore the pain that is us, the fears that we experience, we give ourselves an opportunity to shift deeply, to break through of so many different patterns that once held onto us, that held us so strong. And so what happens then is we begin to change our behavioral patterns. Many of our behaviors, much of the way that we interact with ourselves, see ourselves, our sense of self-worth, the way that we give and receive love, much of that is formed during our developmental years. And when we give ourselves an opportunity to shift that, we change dramatically. So many of us experience trauma and we experience abuse. And again, that abuse can be maybe being told by your teacher that you're just not good enough, that you're not smart enough. Maybe trauma can be going home and being really happy about something that happened at school. Maybe you won a bronze medal in a running race and bringing that to mum or dad, and mum or dad just looking at you, not really caring, really disconnected from you. Apathy there, a vagueness, non-interest. That can be a traumatic event. Because if you interpret that in a particular way and you hold that as truth and that affects you and you don't express the emotion around that, what happens is the brain starts looking for similar experiences. It creates more of them in your life, and it compounds, and you reinforce that I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy enough of being seen. And that can be a traumatic event, an experience that you've had. And so now we have an opportunity to shift all that, and to shift and change the way that we give and receive love, to shift and change the way that we show up in relationship. Maybe in relationship, when we've been pushed to our edge, we retract because we don't know any other way. That's the only way we know to protect our heart, to protect ourselves, to not feel those painful emotions that we once felt, that we vowed never to feel again. The ego vowed never to feel those emotions again. And to be at peace with ourselves, we think at least, if we repress that, if we retract, that's going to serve us and it's going to serve others, and it doesn't. Because people want the fullness of you. People want to feel you, all of you. People want to see you. People want to be able to hold who you are. They want to see your truth and know your truth. And in that knowing of truth, that's when the relationship is able to flourish, and that's when you can heal yourself. You can shift patterns, you can equilibrate, neutralize, change the relationship that you have to yourself through others. Others don't do it for us. That's a perception of a codependent relationship, which is unhealthy, because our sense of self, our sense of worth, our state of being, our happiness, our joy, our clarity is dependent on others. No. What happens is we attract and we bring people into our lives to assist us on our journey, and we can assist them. And our wounding often complements each other and it matches itself. And so there you have an opportunity to go a little bit deeper into self, but not only through the mind and the brain. This video is really an opportunity for you to get you in your body, because so much of trauma kicks us out of our bodies. And if we're out of our bodies, which is the unconscious, which is the feeling body, the emotional body, then we can't feel. And we're missing a crucial part of our healing and our transformation. Tragedy leads to triumph only if we're present to it. All triumph comes from tragedy. That's how deep transformation takes place. And so the invitation is to ask you to go deep into your tragedy, to feel your tragedy in a very safe way, to not only understand it cognitively, but to release it through the feeling body. And then and there, you can begin to make some life changes that will take you to another level and another place. Many blessings on your journey.